Hello YouTube friends, welcome to the Last Homely House. I'm Kate and today I want to share with you a project with some fabric that I was sent a little while ago. Now, I was asked if I would look at this fabric, which is from the newest designer for Free Spirit, Sam Wilde, also known as Vespertine, which is a lovely name, isn't it? And this is his line Fluorescence. And these fabrics arrived with me a little while ago. I talked about them on Instagram, but today I want to tell you what it is I'm hoping to do with all of these beautiful fabrics. They're very bold, and it's taken me a while to decide how best to use them. They're also very different from each other. Some of them hang together really beautifully, and some of them are really quite different. And so I wanted to use all of them. I wanted to make something that would reflect the beauty of all of them hanging together. So I took to Pinterest. Do you do that? I get lots of inspiration from people who pin really interesting things on Pinterest. And for the longest time, I've had a board with quilt blocks that I'm interested in making. And this particular block's been on there. And I've came back to it and never really found the right fabric to use to make it. And it's the optical illusion block. I made this one up from some Tula Pink, in fact, just to see how it would look. And the idea of the optical illusion quilt is that these fabrics look like they're floating on a background. And so, you know, your eye sort of plays that little trick on you that optical illusions do. And when I saw these fabrics and looked back at those quilts on Pinterest, I thought, yeah, optical illusion quilt. That's what I want to make with these fabrics. So I had a little play and I looked at some of the instructions that people have left on their Pinterest boards. That's what I really enjoy about Pinterest. People are really generous with tutorials and instructions and inspiration and thoughts and ideas, and I find it a really useful place. It's a bit of a time waster. Do you ever do that thing? I'll just spend 5 minutes on Pinterest and 3 hours later you're still there? Yeah, that is me, sadly. Anyway, I looked at a number of different ways of constructing this block, and all of them involved cutting little strips of fabric and sewing a little bit of another colour onto them. Now, in order to make this optical illusion, it's a good idea if the background is quite neutral and the shadow, which you're creating here, is black or very dark coloured. And so I have black for the shadow, and I chose this lovely grey for the background. You could use white. Black and white would be very startlingly different, wouldn't it, for a shadow? You can use all sorts of different colour palettes, but I've decided I'm going to use this lovely disappearing grey with these fabrics and black for my shadow. Now, all of them had you cutting little strips and sewing them together, and I'm not happy with accurately sewing these, cutting and sewing these. So I came up with an idea that's probably lots of people use to make this block, but I'm wondering if I've invented this. I'm sure everyone in the comments will tell me that I haven't invented it. But I've made this block, this strip set, whatever you want to call it, and from this one, so I've sewn my background fabric, the grey, and my shadow fabric, the back, together in a big long strip. And what I'm going to do with this then is just cut it as I need it and sew it onto my blocks. Now, this requires 2 different sizes of strip, a long one and a slightly shorter one. So I'll make up a second one of these so that it's the right size for what I'm doing. So in my immediate future, there's a lot of pressing, cutting, stitching, pressing, cutting, stitching, rinse and repeat. All of that this morning is what I'm going to be doing. And I'm going to need the design board, so I'm going to take everything that I've got on there already off the design board. I'm working on these pluses. This is an English paper piece project I'm doing for my grandson, who's 1 now, and I'm making him a quilt like I made his sister Agnes a hexagons quilt. I'm making him this plus quilt. I don't mind that it's being slow in the making. It's coming together bit by bit, just like Agnes's quilt did. There's no hurry for this. He's quite a patient baby. And so I'm going to put this together as and when I have the time. But I'm going to take this off the board now so that I can make some of these blocks, sling them up on the board and see what they look like. This sample one that I made with this Tula pink fabric, which I love by the way, I used this a few years ago as the back of a quilt. The whole of the back was this beautiful green and teal colour. It looked really nice, and I have a little bit of that left over, so I used this. And I cut this one to 4.5 inches, which finishes at 4 inches. But I think I'm going to cut my optical illusion squares from this lovely fluorescence fabric at 5 inches. And then this will fit my strips here. So I'm going to get into the construction of that. But before I do, I'm going to clear the board. Okay, lovely. Well, it's quite a bit later now. Based on the block that I made, the sample one that I made, I've cut all my squares at 5 inches, and I've cut 9 from each of the fabrics, and there are 9 fabrics, so there are 81 squares. Now I've got more fabric, so if I wanted to make the quilt bigger I could do that, but for now I'm going to choose these 9 by 9 81 squares. So then I worked out how I wanted the shadows to look, and so this little grey bit here is blends into the background when the whole thing is constructed, and the black here gives the illusion of the piece floating a little bit above the background. And so getting the proportions of these right, I've just been playing around a little bit to get those right. And I've got all my measurements here. Now I'm not good at maths. I really do struggle with it, which is why the Quilt Planner's Notebook, and I'm on my second volume of my Quilt Planner's Notebook. The very first quilt in here is Your Quilt Sam, the fluorescence quilt, the optical illusion quilt. And it's such a helpful thing to have the graph paper and the lined paper and then some plain paper as well. So I'm going to use these pages here to write down all my measurements. Now, as I say, I'm a bit challenged with maths, so I've worked it out really quite carefully. And based on this 5-inch square and how I want my shadows to be, I've got all the measurements here. So yeah, the measurements are a bit complicated, but maybe I'll leave a list in the description box below of the sizes that I used to achieve this block. And then I made these, which is instead of messing around with tiny little thin bits of fabric, which I think I would just make. I don't think I would get that right somehow. So I made these blocks here, and I will stitch these. This is how this is going to work. So the first one I will sew that block onto there and then iron that out and cut it to size, and the second one I'll iron the second one on because one of them is slightly bigger than the other. I think the best thing I can do is show you how I'm making this and actually sew one, but then when the block is constructed, what happens next is the sashing, and I've chosen this 2-inch sashing with this grey on either side, and then the sashing will come in here, long runs of sashing here. Have I got another bit? Yeah, here, which will, once you see this quilt from a distance and squint at it, then all this grey will merge into itself and the shadows will become apparent and the blocks will be suspended above the... This is the hope anyway. So what I think I'll do now is stop talking and I'm going to use the bits and pieces that I've cut out here and construct a block so that we can see what this looks like. This sashing, the final sashing, won't go on until all the blocks are constructed because this is the bit that connects it all together. But these 2 bits of sashing will go on. Let's make a block, shall we? And stop talking, Kate. Okay, good idea. First piece then, one of my 5-inch squares with the black and grey, the shorter of the two, 1/4 inch seam. And when I get going with this, I'll chain piece them, but for now I want to show you this one. So I'm using one of my little thread bunnies, which keeps the sewing moving. Okay, so my ironing setup here is so that I can press this open here. And then I've got my cutting board. I like this setup. Everything's so to hand. It's really great. And I'm cutting this to 1 inch. I'm cutting the black, it's actually 1.5 inches, but instead of cutting these to 1.5 inches, I'm going to cut it off here. I think when I get going I might cut these strips off, but for now I'm just doing it this way, just so that I can show you what I'm doing. So I cut that off there, just neaten that up actually, in line with the 5 inches. That's it, lovely. Now the next one needs to go on. I did this one earlier and I sewed it on the wrong direction. There's only 2 ways to do it, and of course I did it the wrong way, but I'm going to have that one there to remind me that that bit of grey is there, so the next bit of grey needs to be up here. And I'm using this fabric now, which has got the longer bit on, so let's just put this, you see I'm already confused. What am I doing? There. So that one needs to go there. No, it doesn't. Hang on a minute, Kate. So if you watch Jenny at the Missouri Star Quilt Company, she's always saying that she's angrily challenged. I could give her a run for her money. I really could. It's the other end, Kate. That's why. It's this end. There we go. I need the greys to be as far apart as possible, diagonally like that. So that one goes on there. Yes, Jenny, definitely give you a run for your money there. It's a wonder that I actually managed to sew anything ever with the maths and the angles. But I love it, and so I think I maybe overcome some of this stuff because of that. Okay. So this one, press it open. I'll get much quicker at this when I get going with it. I'm chain piecing all of these. And then cut the black to 1 inch. And there's my second block. And this one, the blue one, I made first of all. Now this is the other thing, you've got to get them the right way round. Yes. So you've got to get them so that the shadows are all going the right way. So that's something else to consider, isn't it? It is. And now the sashing goes on the top and the bottom, and then when I've got loads of them, the sashing will go in between. So for now, I may not put the sashing on. I just wanted to see what that looked like, to see if the 2 inches for the sashing was the right size, and it is. So what I might do then is just sew a load of these and get into the rhythm of doing them the right way round. Do you think I can manage that? I think I probably can. Right, I'm off. Short one first. Now maybe you think I'm making life more complicated for myself by not cutting these first, but I know that cutting very narrow, thin strips can sometimes distort, and it seems to me like this is actually quite a good way to do it. But I'd be more than happy to read your comments and tell me that this is a terrible way of doing it. And from people who've made this optical illusion block before, maybe you've got some better tips for me. But I do like making things up as I go along. Yeah, when I do the whole lot, all of them, I'll just sew these as a continuous strip. But for now I appear to be doing this in quite a clumsy way. So that's the short one. This is the long one. Let's try cutting it at 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches. See how that goes. 1.25 inches. Yep. Might be easier. Yeah, it's definitely easier. So that one needs to go there. Yes. And that one needs to go there. Okay, so lesson learned. I'm definitely going to cut these strips off this block, short one and a long one, so that I can construct these blocks as a chain piecing way, because there's 81 of them to do. So I'll see you soon. Well, I'm on the last part of construction for this quilt top, and so I have the last row to sew on, and sadly I don't have enough of the grey to do the final bit of sashing on the outside. I can put this last row onto here, but there just isn't enough of this to do the last run. So sadly there isn't going to be a finish today. It's going to be an almost complete finish, but there's going to be a little bit more of this grey needed. And I bought this grey specially, so I'm going to have to order a small amount to finish this quilt top. But I'll put this last row on and we'll iron it all up and put it on the board, and we'll be able to see almost a finish on this quilt. I'm really loving it. I like how it looks very much. So I'll show you when I've put this last run on what it looks like. Annoying. So I'm just giving it a final press. There definitely isn't enough of this, which is very annoying. When you've just finished a quilt and you're ironing it like I am, don't you find that everywhere you look there's little tiny threads? So I'm going to spend half an hour pulling threads off this thing. Let's hang it on the board and see how it looks. Wow, there it is, finished. It's very different from any quilt I've made before, but I love how this fabric, this fluorescence, how it works with this technique of shadowing these squares here. I've had the idea of making an optical illusion quilt for years. It's been on my Pinterest board for years, and there it is done. And sadly, there's only this much of the grey left. But I understand why now, because originally I was going to make this 9 by 9, and because I liked the idea of making this quilt bigger, it's 10 by 10, and I would have had enough of the grey to finish the sashing if I hadn't made it bigger, but I like that it's bigger. It's all right, I can order some more. Annoying though. So I'll order some more of this and finish that last bit of sashing, and I may order a bit more and do the binding as well. That could look quite good, couldn't it? Because we don't want anything in the binding to detract from the quilt, from the look of the quilt. And now the next thing I have to think about is how to quilt this, and I'm not quite sure yet. But what I'll do in a future video is I'll show you my quilting decision. And maybe I'll bind it with you in a future video. I'm going to leave it up here for a couple of days though while this arrives, and just walk past it and admire it. That's why the board's great. It's great to have somewhere to put this up and look at it from a distance, from every angle. So thank you very much to Sam Wilde for sending me this fabric. Free Spirit sent me this fabric. It's called Fluorescence. And I will leave the dimensions of these blocks in the description below. It's not hard to work out, in fact, but I'll leave these measurements in case you wanted to make something a bit like this. So the next time you see this then, it'll be quilted and I'll be binding it. In a future video I'll do that with you. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. And if you have, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. That's just a little button in the corner there. It doesn't cost anything. Just pop the subscriptions on and then you'll get notified when I do a new video. But for now, that's a finish, partial finish, just a tiny bit more to do on my fluorescence quilt. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do.